I hadn't seen her in 4 years, but I still remembered the way she used to look at people, like she was trying to read what they weren't saying. When I saw her again that evening, standing at the kitchen counter with her hair tied loose and a faint line of exhaustion across her cheek, my throat went dry. I'd stopped by to drop something off for my friend, a book he'd forgotten at my place, but he wasn't home. She was. "Come in," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "He's running late, as always." Her voice hadn't changed. Low, calm, but with that tiny lift at the end, the kind that made you want to say something just to keep her talking. I stepped inside, the familiar smell of lemon polish and rain lingering in the air. The window was open, letting in a soft drizzle, and I could hear the sound of slow music coming from another room. "You've grown," she said, after a moment that went on too long. Then, that half-smile. "Into trouble, haven't you?" I laughed, but it came out uneven. "Guess so." She was wearing a loose gray sweater, one shoulder slipping enough to show the line of her collarbone. Not on purpose, or maybe it was. She moved like someone who didn't realize she was being watched, or someone who had learned to pretend she didn't care anymore. I set the book down on the counter, trying not to look at her hands. I remembered those hands from years ago, when she'd hand us cold drinks after soccer practice, brushing her thumb over the glass before passing it. I hadn't known why that detail stuck in my memory. Now I did. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the stool across from her. "You can wait here if you want. He shouldn't be long." I sat. The stool creaked. She poured coffee, one mug for herself, one for me, even though I hadn't asked. "You still take it black?" she asked. I froze. "You remember that?" She shrugged. "Some things stick." The air between us did something strange, it thickened, like a silence that wanted to confess something. We talked, or tried to. Small things. Her work. My classes. The weather. But every few seconds, our eyes met and drifted apart again, as if we were both afraid of what the other might see there. There was a photo on the counter, her, younger, standing beside her husband. He was gone now. I knew that much. I wondered how many people had stopped mentioning his name, thinking they were doing her a favor. When she reached for her cup, her hand brushed mine. It wasn't deliberate. Not at first. But neither of us moved away. She looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something that wasn't supposed to be there, a flicker of recognition, the kind that felt both wrong and inevitable. "I shouldn't," she started, but didn't finish. The sound of the rain outside filled the gap where her words should have been. I leaned back, trying to breathe like this was normal, but my pulse had other plans. Her gaze softened, almost like she wanted to apologize for something she hadn't done yet. Then she smiled again, slower this time, more careful. "Tell him I made you coffee," she said, breaking the moment like it was glass. "So he owes me one." I nodded, stood up, and almost left. But at the door, I turned back. She was still watching me. "Good night," I said. "Good night, Trouble," she replied, quiet, almost tender. The way she said it didn't sound like a joke anymore. And that was the moment I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't going away. I told myself I was only going back to help. That was all. Her sink had been leaking for weeks, and when she mentioned it in passing the last time I saw her, I offered before I even thought. "You sure you know what you're doing?" she asked, leaning against the counter while I crouched under it, wrench in hand. "More or less," I said, tightening a pipe I'd already checked twice. "Just trying to save you from calling a plumber." She laughed softly. "You say that like you're rescuing me." The sound of her voice made the small kitchen feel even smaller. I could see her feet from where I was, bare, toenails painted the same muted red as her mug. Every now and then, she'd shift her weight, and I'd feel it like static in the air. She had been through something. I could tell, even if she didn't talk about it. The house felt quieter now. Half lived in. Like someone had packed up all the noise and left her with the silence. You don't have to keep fixing things here, she said suddenly. You've got better things to do. I didn't look up. You asked me to. I know, she said softly. That's what worries me. The wrench slipped. My hand scraped against the edge of the pipe, but I didn't move. Her words lingered, low and weighted. When I stood, she was right in front of me, holding a towel. Her fingers brushed mine as she wrapped it around my hand. It's not bad, I said, though I could barely focus on the cut. She didn't let go. You shouldn't always say that, she murmured. That everything's fine. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine, a kind of tired honesty there that made me forget what I was supposed to say next. I'm not your problem, I said quietly. I didn't say you were. But she hadn't stepped back. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked in the next room. The rain outside had stopped, leaving behind that clean smell that always follows storms. She sighed, finally moving away. I'm sorry. I've been strange lately. I don't mean to pull you into that. I wanted to tell her she hadn't, that I was already there, long before tonight. But I couldn't say it. I just watched her as she poured more coffee, her hand trembling slightly when she set the mug down. Do you ever miss him? I asked before I could stop myself. She froze. Then nodded once. Every day. But not the way I'm supposed to. That silence again. Heavy, but not cold. I turned toward the door, trying to leave before I said something that would make it worse. Stay a little longer, she said suddenly. I looked back. Her tone was light, or meant to be, but her eyes gave her away. Please, she added. And that word, soft, almost breaking, was all it took to make me stay. I shouldn't have stayed. Every part of me knew that. But she'd said please, and that word had a way of undoing me. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The air was warmer now, the smell of coffee gone stale, the quiet stretching too long. She looked tired in a way I hadn't noticed before, the kind of tired that comes from pretending to be fine. I haven't really had anyone around lately, she said, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. The house gets too quiet. I nodded, unsure what to say. I get that. She gave a small laugh. No, you don't. You're 20-something. The world's still too loud for you. The words stung, though not because they were wrong. Maybe it was the way she said you're young, like it was something temporary, something she'd already lost. I looked at her then, really looked, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she didn't want to be seen too clearly. I think you underestimate how lonely 20-something can be, I said quietly. Her eyes lifted to mine. For a second, the distance between us vanished. Then her phone buzzed. The sound broke the stillness like glass. She glanced at the screen, turned it face down. Your son? I asked, even though I already knew. She hesitated. Yeah. He said he might stay out tonight. Something in my chest tightened. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. She stood up, walked to the window, arms crossed. The rain had started again, light, steady. She watched it in silence. I used to love nights like this, she said. When he was younger, I'd sit right here, waiting for him to come home. I'd complain about the mess, the noise. Now I'd give anything to hear it again. Her voice cracked at the end, barely audible. I wanted to comfort her, say something, do something, but my words wouldn't come. Instead, I stepped closer. Close enough to smell her perfume, faint, familiar, like jasmine and rain. She turned slightly, her shoulder brushing my chest. Neither of us moved. "Don't," she whispered. I couldn't tell if she meant don't go or don't stay. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I stepped back, but only half a step. "You should get some rest," I managed. She nodded, eyes still down. "You're right." I picked up my jacket from the chair, fingers trembling. And then, her hand reached out, catching my sleeve. Just a touch. But it stopped everything. "You're not like him," she said softly. "Who?" "Your father. The way he left." It didn't make sense, or maybe it did, in some quiet way that didn't need words. We stood there, the sound of rain growing louder, her hand still resting against my arm. The phone buzzed again. She didn't move. Neither did I. For one suspended moment, the line between right and wrong blurred, and neither of us seemed ready to draw it again. I didn't plan to see her again that week. I told myself I'd give her space, give us space, before whatever this was turned into something neither of us could explain. But space didn't last long. She called the next evening. Her voice was quiet, like she was trying not to disturb the air around her. "The heater's gone out," she said. "I know it's late, but," I didn't let her finish. "I'll come by." The drive was short, but it felt endless. The air was heavy, fogged with the kind of anticipation that had nothing to do with broken heaters. When she opened the door, she was wrapped in a blanket, her hair messy, eyes tired. "You didn't have to," she said. "I wanted to." The living room was dim except for the small lamp near the couch. I knelt near the baseboard, pretending to check the controls, but my focus was gone. I could feel her watching me. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked suddenly. I turned, startled. "Which night?" "The one with the coffee. When I asked you to stay." I swallowed. "Yeah." She smiled faintly, but there was no amusement in it. "You shouldn't have." "I know." She came closer, setting her mug down beside me. "Then why did you?" The question lingered between us, raw, too simple, too dangerous. I stood slowly, and suddenly we were only inches apart. "Because you asked me to." Her breath caught. "That's not an answer." "Then maybe I don't have one." She exhaled, a small, broken sound that almost passed for laughter. "You're too young to get stuck in things like this." "Then why call me?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked uncertain, almost fragile. It made something inside me shift, the same mix of guilt and want that had been growing since that first smile. "You think this is a game," she said softly. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I think it's real, and that's what scares you." That silence, long, unsteady, was louder than anything we'd said all week. Her blanket slipped off one shoulder, but she didn't move to fix it. The lamplight traced the edge of her collarbone, the curve of her throat. She looked human. Not the composed, unreachable version I'd grown up knowing. Just her. She stepped back, but not far enough. "You don't understand what this would mean." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me it doesn't mean anything." She didn't. Instead, she looked at me with that same unreadable stare, half defiance, half confession. "You make it hard to breathe sometimes," she whispered. I froze. I didn't trust my voice, so I said nothing. The heater clicked on, humming softly, a small, mechanical reminder that the world was still turning outside that room. She turned away first, her hands trembling slightly. "You should go," she said. I nodded, but neither of us moved. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was waiting, pulsing, almost alive. And in it, I realized, whatever line we'd been pretending not to see, we were already standing on it. I didn't hear from her for 2 days. That silence had its own weight, not cold, not final, just suspended. Like she was deciding whether to erase what had almost happened, or pretend it never did. On the third day, I saw her name flash on my phone. "Can you come by? Just for a minute." When I arrived, she was standing by the window, a glass of water untouched on the table. The place looked the same, tidy, quiet, lived in, but something in her posture was different. Guarded. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded, but her eyes didn't meet mine. "There's something I should have told you earlier." I froze. There it was, the tone people use before they push you back to where you belong. She took a deep breath. "You remember your father?" The question caught me off guard. "Not really. He left when I was 10. She nodded slowly. "He was around. After that." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, searching for words. "He came to me. A few times. Years ago. After he left your mother. I didn't know who you were when I met you back then, not until I saw you again here." The words hit like cold water. The air between us seemed to twist, heavy and sharp. "So, I managed, you knew." "I figured it out later," she said softly. "After that first day you came by. It was like seeing a ghost I didn't know I missed. I couldn't breathe for a second." "And you still," she looked at me sharply. "Don't." But it was too late. The question was already out there, unspoken but real. "And you still let me stay?" She rubbed her temples, pacing. I kept telling myself it wasn't like that. That it couldn't be. "But you kept showing up, and you what?" Her voice broke. "I didn't want to see you that way, but I couldn't stop." The honesty in her voice hurt more than any lie could have. I turned away, staring at the framed photos on her shelf, her son, younger, me standing beside him years ago, both of us grinning after a soccer game. She'd taken that picture. I remembered her behind the camera, telling us to look alive. I laughed then, a bitter, half-choked sound. "Guess we've been circling each other longer than either of us knew." She closed her eyes, whispering, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not stopping it sooner. For not being stronger." Something cracked in her tone, regret, but not disgust. More like loss. I stepped closer, just enough that she could feel it. "You think this changes what I feel?" "It should. But it doesn't." She looked up, eyes wet, face pale. "Then you're making the same mistake he did." That line landed like a confession, and a warning. Before I could speak, her phone buzzed on the table. A name lit up the screen, her son. My friend. The sound cut through everything. Her gaze flicked from the phone to me, terrified, silent, waiting. Neither of us moved. The phone kept ringing. And suddenly, everything we hadn't said hung in the air, demanding an answer. The phone stopped ringing, leaving only the sound of her uneven breathing. She didn't move toward it. Neither did I. It was like we were both waiting for someone else to make the first mistake. Then she spoke, so quietly I almost missed it. "He's on his way home." The words were simple, but they landed like a door slamming shut. I nodded, stepping back. "Then I should go." She didn't answer. Her eyes followed me as I reached for my jacket, the same one I'd left hanging on her chair 3 nights ago. When I turned, she was still by the window, her reflection a faint ghost against the glass. "Do you hate me?" I asked. Her expression shifted, surprise, pain, something else I couldn't name. "No," she said. "I hate that it feels like I can't." That was the closest she'd come to saying it. The thing neither of us were brave enough to name. "I didn't plan any of this," I said. "You know that, right?" "I know," she whispered. And that's what makes it worse. I took a step closer. She didn't move away this time. The rain outside had slowed, tapping softly against the pane, the same rhythm that had filled the silence between us since that first night. You could have told me, I said. I wanted to, she said. Every time you looked at me like you already knew. I almost did. Her eyes glistened. But what would I have said? Your father once tried to love me, and now you do too. The words caught in her throat. I felt them like a bruise I hadn't noticed before. I'm not him, I said quietly. I know, she said again, softer this time. That's why it hurts. We stood there, the space between us closing and widening with every breath. Then, she reached out. Her hand brushed my cheek, fingers trembling. You make me remember what I used to feel like, she whispered. Alive. Wanted. But it's not fair to you. It's my choice, I said. She smiled, faint, sad, knowing. That's the thing about choices. They don't erase the consequences. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. It wasn't a stare of longing anymore. It was recognition, two people who had walked too far into something they couldn't stay in, but couldn't step back from either. I'll miss this, I said finally. Don't, she replied. Just, remember it right. I wanted to ask what that meant, but I understood. So instead, I did something small. I reached for her hand, held it, just once. No words. No promises. Just the quiet truth of skin against skin. When her son's car pulled up outside, headlights flashing through the window, she didn't pull away. But when the engine cut off, she did. Go, she said softly. Before it gets harder. I nodded, walked to the door. Hey, she called after me. I turned. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Thank you. For making me feel seen again. And then she smiled, the kind of smile that said goodbye without needing to say it at all. It's strange how silence changes after goodbye. It used to feel heavy, something that pressed down on me, made me restless. Now it just feels, still. Like something that knows it's done its job. I didn't see her again for a while after that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew I couldn't. There are moments that don't belong to the world outside their walls, and ours had ended the second her son's headlights cut across the rain. He never found out, as far as I know. Maybe she told him in her own way, through distance, through the way she looked at him with more patience afterward. And me? I learned how to live with the space she left, not as a wound, but as a quiet lesson. Some weeks later, I drove past her house. The porch light was off, the curtains drawn. A "for sale" sign leaned crooked in the front yard. I didn't stop. Just slowed down enough to see the faint reflection of her in the window, or maybe that was just memory playing tricks again. For a moment, I thought about all the things we didn't say. How regret isn't always about what you did, sometimes it's about what you finally understood too late. She once told me that love and timing never seem to agree. Back then, I thought it was just something people said to excuse their mistakes. Now I think it's the truest thing I've ever heard. Because what we had wasn't wrong in feeling, it was wrong in time. If she had been younger, or I older, maybe the world wouldn't have flinched at the sight of us. Maybe we wouldn't have flinched either. But maybe that's the point, that some people are meant to change you, not stay with you. To remind you that connection doesn't need to last to be real. I think about her sometimes when it rains. How the first time we really looked at each other, the window was half open and the world smelled like wet pavement. How her voice softened when she said please. How her hand felt, trembling, warm, alive, when it brushed mine. I don't remember the last words we said to each other exactly, but I remember how they felt. Like release. Like something between forgiveness and surrender. She once said, just remember it right. And I try to. Not as something forbidden or broken, but as something fragile that dared to exist for a moment, and then let go. So, yeah. I guess I still think about her. Not in the way that keeps you stuck, but in the way that reminds you you're human. Because some stories don't end with a kiss. They end with the sound of a door closing softly, and someone finally breathing again on the other side. Speech balloon, did you enjoy the story? Would you want to hear more stories about quiet, complicated love, or should the next one explore something new, like regret, second chances, or love that arrives too late?